Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Finca Isnul Wash Process Guatemala from Onyx Coffee Lab. And there's the bag right there. And Onyx, based out of Bentonville, Arkansas. And this coffee right here was featured in our most recent blind taste test rankings video, where it did finish third place out of 5 Onyx coffees on that day. And what's really interesting about this coffee is it is the only wash process that was included in that blind taste test video. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where it finished relative to a bunch of anaerobic and natural processed coffees. This right here is day 12 of this coffee. And the recipe we went with was the one from their YouTube channel, their brew guide, which was a 16:1 water to coffee ratio at 208 degrees Fahrenheit through the V60. Now, Onyx is a light medium American for the roast profile, but this one felt a shade more developed than the other coffees on that table, so just keep that in mind. And with that out of the way, let's start discussing this coffee. So day 6, which was that blind taste test rankings day, and what we noticed most about this coffee was it was relatively tame compared to the other cups of coffee on that table. Not too surprising, the only washed, but there were a lot of components that we were experiencing our first time trying this coffee that were very similar from last year's coffee. The most prominent notable thing was some citrus, but at the same time it had a slight bit of smokiness, which was a dead giveaway. Kind of figured that the most smoky cup of coffee on that table was going to be the coffee that we had familiarity with. So of course, we were able to pick this coffee out, and even then it still finished middle of the pack, so it just left an okay first impression from our first time trying it. Day 8, it was kind of difficult to pinpoint an exact component that was like most prominent, most forward, as it was probably the black tea, and I always have difficulty kind of pinpointing the black tea earlier on. It just takes me a little bit more time than some other flavors that come from a cup of coffee, but I could definitely say in hindsight, fair bit of black tea, definitely a fair bit of citrus. The citrus is at the forefront of this coffee, and it's probably the most consistent component you're experiencing throughout the time drinking this coffee. A faint, lingering stone fruit at the warmer temperatures, but not as abundant as may be expected. And then the most distinct thing towards the end was a smoky chocolate. So it was another okay day, and that's when we started adjusting with Onyx's brew guide, and that made a huge difference. So that is something that we really want to emphasize, is we were doing pretty standard recipes, which was 16, 6, 7 to 1 at 203 or 205 degrees, and we weren't getting better results. We weren't getting good results with that through the Chemex. Once we adjusted to the V60 and with their recipe, we were getting significantly better results, as it was a significantly better all-around cup. Pronounced stone fruits at the warmer temperatures, and that's been consistent since then. A slight bit of sugary sweetness that was most reminiscent for me of a sugar cookie, a coconut sugar cookie. So it was quite nice. Cools off into a very nutty and savory teacup before settling into a fair bit of citrus. Still that slight bit of smokiness, but interestingly enough, the higher temperatures actually reduced the amount of smokiness that was coming from the cup of coffee. So a marked improvement on day 10. And then day 11, same notes. For the most part, enjoying this cup of coffee much more at the warmer temperatures. Been harping on how much I enjoy stone fruits a lot in so many of these videos. So getting that stone fruit at the start of the cup of coffee was pretty nice. It wasn't an abundant stone fruit, but it was definitely there. And then there was, of course, the very noticeable citrus, most notably the lemon, and they have lemonade listed on here. Makes perfect sense. Quite a bit of lemon throughout that cup of coffee. Let's see here, it's leaving quite a bit of a finish. That's been consistent with all these coffees, these Onyx coffees that we've been reviewed. They have some pretty lasting finishes to their coffee. And then a distinct savory black tea kind of as the coffee has cooled down, and it's a lot of what you're experiencing in that lingering finish. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. All right, we have a lot of level 4s, so let's go through them real quick. Cleanliness, level 4. Yeah, this is probably one of the cleaner coffees of the Onyx coffees that we're reviewing. It's probably most justified at the level 4. It's probably the most true level 4 out of any of them. Finish, we've been touching on that too. I don't think that any of them finished up below a 4. They're all pretty lasting cups of coffee. Sweetness, level 4. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of sweetness. Acidity, level 3, and that's been kind of interesting for these Onyx coffees, is they've been consistent in that higher acidic mark to this point. The saltiness at level 4, and yeah, that one is kind of interesting because there's a lot of saltiness from the very strong citrus, so you could say a lemon saltiness, but at the same time a nutty saltiness. So there is so much saltiness in this cup of coffee that it's probably one of the highest salty components we've ever put on a tasting wheel. Citrus fruit, level 4. Yeah, stone fruit, level 4. Probably a little generous. It's probably a level 3. I'm not entirely sure why I marked that all the way up to a level 4. Chocolate, level 4. Yeah, it's there. It's a more smoky chocolate, more dark chocolate, sort of chocolate, but it's there as well. And that's where the bitterness and the smokiness both come from. It's a bitter dark chocolate as well as a smoky dark chocolate. Have a bit of savoriness, which is the black tea. I noticed the black tea and chocolate seem to go together a lot. Body on the heavier side of things. Anything else worth discussing? At least everything here is on a level 2, so you're getting a little bit of everything in this cup of coffee, which is kind of interesting for it being a wash process coffee. But yeah, I like the way that the tasting wheel looks for the most part, with the exception of that stone fruit. I'm not entirely sure why that's as high as it is, but I guess I was feeling 4 on that day. Alright, overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I thought it was okay. I think that what I've liked the most about Onyx in the past has been their cleaner naturals, and that's been the biggest selling point for me for them as a business as a whole. And I liked their washed coffees here and there. Some I was a big fan of, some I wasn't necessarily a big fan of. And I remember having this one last year and thinking that it was one of the less impressive washed coffees that they had throughout the entire year. So I think that this one's an improvement from last year's version of that coffee. It's just not necessarily my favorite sort of wash process that they come out with. That's not really surprising, not necessarily my flavor profile. It's not the biggest fan of citrus, not the biggest fan of savory components, specifically that tea. And the stone fruit wasn't as pronounced as I might have hoped, but even then it had some pretty nice characteristics to it. And as a result, it was probably my 4th favorite of the Onyx coffees that we're reviewing from this set. So yeah, take that how you will for this coffee. The type of person I would suggest this coffee to is, well, you know, jokingly somebody that likes an Arnold Palmer, because you had a fair bit of savory black tea and lemonade, and they were definitely quite pronounced. But some great sweetness. There's quite a bit of sweetness to this. I think if you're kind of on the verge of that slightly medium profile, I think this one's pushing that development spectrum still ever so slightly, as there's a very tiny bit of roastiness that's much more present in this cup of coffee than there is in a lot of the other cups of coffee. As a result, you get a little bit of a trade-off as you get a little bit more of this body and some pretty nice clarity to the cup. So I think that that would be a good fit for somebody for this coffee. I think I'm going to leave this review at that, though. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Finca Isnul Wash Process Guatemala from Onyx Coffee Lab. Thank you for watching.